Hey everyone, hope you're having a great day. The most recent report on inflation was just released, and some of the numbers look bad, and some of the numbers look okay. So what I want to do in this video is break down exactly what that report says as simply as possible so you have a better understanding of it. Because remember, these reports influence the Fed meetings. Now the next Fed meeting is September 20th, and then there is another one in November. So we have to understand what's going on in these reports to better understand how the Fed will react in those meetings. So let's get right into it. As always, my name is Derek and I got my degree in finance, so you don't have to. Now, this report, there are two numbers that we want to look at. We want to look at headline inflation, or what's known as CPI inflation, Consumer Price Index, and we also want to look at core inflation. Now, the main difference between these two numbers is core inflation removes what's known as volatile metrics, usually food and energy prices. These are metrics that move volatilely month to month. So these two numbers are important. Now, the bad news is that CPI inflation actually went up from 3.2% to 3.7%. Now, remember, these are inflation for the previous trailing 12 months. So that's bad news. It is an increase in inflation, which means that inflation is still here and the fight for inflation is still not over. Now, core inflation, which removes the volatile assets like energy and food, that actually came down from 4.7% to 4.3% for the previous 12 months. That is positive news. So now that we know the numbers, I guess the main question is, what is the Fed going to do with these numbers, and how is the Fed going to react on September 20th as well as their November meeting? Well, we can kind of deduct a couple of things from this report. One, the fight for inflation is not over. Two, the fight for inflation is rockier than expected or than desired. But three, it does seem to be moving in the right direction. Now, what the Fed is going to do on September 20th, we can only guess, but there is some indicators that the Fed most likely will not raise interest rates on September 20th. The majority of consensus is that the Fed will hold interest rates stable on the September 20th meeting. The more important meeting is the November meeting, where there is a good chance that the Fed might increase interest rates, and this only makes that more likely. The fact of the matter is, inflation is still 2% above the Fed target rate. Remember, the Fed wants inflation as close to 2% as possible. Anywhere between 2 and 2.5% is the target. Core inflation came down from 4.7 to 4.3%, which is still about double. Now, the CPI inflation went up. Now, some people might say, well, you should take out food and energy prices. I'm not quite so certain about that. Energy prices, maybe, but food prices, I'm not so certain, and I think that the CPI gives a better understanding of what people are feeling. Because remember, inflation doesn't even matter if people aren't feeling it. Now, what I mean by that is, if your wage is going up so high, so fast, that inflation is 10% lower than your wage growth, it doesn't matter. So what really matters when it comes to inflation is what the consumer, you and I, what we feel. And we most definitely feel energy prices, and we most certainly feel food prices, because we can't live without eating. So the CPI index, in my opinion, you have to look at both numbers, but the fact that the CPI went up from 3.2 to 3.7 means that the fight for inflation is not over, and that we most likely will see a rate hike in the future, most likely not at the September meeting, but possibly at the November meeting, or possibly in future meetings. We will most likely see a rate hike from the Fed, which means that your interest rate on your credit card, on your home loan, on your car loan, etc., will remain elevated until further notice. And that further notice will be once inflation reaches the Fed target rate. We are close to the top of interest rate hikes. I do not think that the Fed is going to raise interest rates that much higher than they are currently, but this report has good news and bad news, but it also, I think the main takeaway that we can see from this is not doom and gloom, but it's not roses and flowers either. It's somewhere in the middle. It's the fact that inflation is still here, that we are still fighting it, and that the Fed is going to have to hold interest rates higher for longer. So There are many other things that the report states. I wanted to focus on the main two, which is CPI and core inflation, because those things directly affect what the Fed does, and they're important for you to know as a personal finance, as someone who wants to improve their knowledge of personal finance and who wants to make better decisions in regards to personal finance. So I hope this video was helpful. I hope I kept it super simple. If I did, and if you took something away from this, please consider subscribing. If you like personal finance and world economics broken down, that's all that we do here. So make sure to turn on the bell notification as well so you don't miss the next video. Usually videos are on Tuesdays, but sometimes I'll release a video on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday if it's important, which today it was. Again, my name is Derek. I got my degree in finance, so you don't have to. Hopefully from this channel, you can get yourself a mini finance degree just from all the good information that I try to put out here. Other than that, take care, and I will see you in the next video.